Hey guys, Sally here. Thanks for stopping by. We're going to talk today about 10 things that can really affect your tires on your RV, and one solution that will resolve almost all those issues pretty much seamlessly. So, first of all, I want to say, if you think you're subscribed, please double check because YouTube has been spontaneously unsubscribing people. And if you haven't subscribed already, why not? You're here watching this, and it doesn't cost you anything. It really helps out the channel. And while we're at it, give it a thumbs up, hit that like button. All right, let's roll the intro and we'll get right into it. Hi, welcome to our video on the top 10 tire troubles and the one solution that can mitigate pretty much most of them. And here's the thing, whether you're a seasoned RV or you're just getting started, these are tips that can likely help you. And truthfully, they don't apply just to RVs. Whether you're driving a van or an SUV or a passenger car, a lot of this stuff applies to that as well. So let's get right into it. Alright, I would love to say I'm a good enough videographer that I could show you what all these things I'm going to talk about, but I just can't. So I'm not even going to go there. Let's start with number one. Probably the biggest thing that most RVers and anybody driving a vehicle is concerned about are blowouts. What causes blowouts? What can you do to avoid that sudden surprise? And how can you prevent it? We're going to talk about those things in general as we move along. But blowouts are one of the biggest things that happen, and what would it be like if you could get maybe a warning, or at least an immediate feedback? This is particularly important, by the way, if you're towing a trailer as opposed to driving an RV, because what's going on behind your truck in that trailer, you might not really know what's going on back there, especially if you've got multiple axles, and blowouts can really tear up a recreational vehicle when that happens. So, the next thing, number two, is going to be underinflation. Underinflation is probably the biggest cause of tire failure ever. So you don't want to be underinflated. It's really important to know what your inflation is. And there are a couple of things around inflation that's really important. Your inflation is based not only on what the sticker on your vehicle might say, because that's designed for whatever your original equipment manufacturer tires are, but it could also be affected by whether or not you have, for example, changed out your tires. If you've changed your tires to something different than the original equipment manufacturer, maybe they've got a higher speed rating or a lower speed rating, maybe they've got a higher load rating or a lower load rating, that can really affect what your inflation pressure should be. So make sure you know what that is. One of the best ways to find out is to contact the tire manufacturer. For example, when I bought Isaac, that's the name of the RV, not the manufacturer or style, just in case you haven't been around before. But when I bought Isaac, and I'll tell you why I did it, the very first thing I did was I actually replaced the tires when I was driving it from the people that I bought it from back to my home 2.5 hours away. I stopped and I had new tires put on. Now, I knew I was going to need to do that, so I had pre-ordered those tires so they were going to be ready for me. And one of the reasons that you need to be really conscious about what's going on is that it can have such a huge impact on what happens with your vehicle. So, underinflation, huge problem. Next big problem is overloading. Yeah, weigh your RV. The Escapees RV Club has a program that they call Smart Weigh, and they do 4-corner weighing, so you actually get the most accurate weights that you possibly can. I thought I was going to get that done when I was at Escapade this past March, but I didn't get in line fast enough to schedule a time for it, so I still haven't done a 4-corner weigh. But I do periodically go through the cat scales at truck stops. With the cat scales, for the most part, you can weigh your front axle and your rear axle, but you can't weigh side to side. So you can only get, front and rear versus all 4 corners. And that's okay too, not a big deal. It's better than not knowing at all. And here's another thing that can affect what your load capacity is beyond what the manufacturer has said. Another great example for me is I have done some suspension upgrades on the Isaac. So I actually have increased my load capacity. Now, that doesn't mean I want to put a whole bunch more stuff in. What it means is that I'm running pretty close to the manufacturer's load capacity, and I'm feeling okay about it because I've increased the suspension's ability to be able to handle that load. Alright, next up, number 3, tire age and consequent UV damage. Tire age. This is exactly why I ended up having to replace my tires before I even got home. I ended up driving about an hour and a half on the old tires. And here's what happens. Time and sunlight takes a toll on your tires. So one of the signs of aging is cracking and crazing along the sides of your sidewalls. But just age in and of itself is something that you may not be aware of at all unless you look at the sidewall and check the manufacturing date. So for example, Isaac is a 2016 coach, motor coach, on a 2015 cutaway chassis. When I looked at the tire date stamp, this is back in 2021 when I bought Isaac, I looked at the tire date stamp, it was February of 2014. Those tires were 7 years old. In general, manufacturers are going to recommend that you don't run RV tires more than 5 or 6 years. 7's really pushing it. And one of the things that happens with tires that's very different between RV tires, if you're not full-time, and conventional tires for your, your passenger cars and whatever, is that what keeps a tire from cracking and crazing is getting lubricated by the oils in the rubber working their way from the inside out as you're rolling down the road. So using tires actually prolongs the life as compared to letting them sit. Alright, fourth up, let's talk about maintenance a little bit. What do you need to do to maintain your tires? Well, one of the very first things you need to do is make sure that they are inflated properly. And you don't want to be moving right into number 5. You don't want to be storing them incorrectly. If you're going to be leaving your vehicle sitting for some time, ideally, you don't want your tires sitting in contact with the ground, especially not with concrete. So you can have things happen like flat spots can develop. They can also deflate. So of course, if you're leaving your rig stored for some period of time, definitely check the pressures before you pull it out. But ideally store it off the wheels. So next up, number 6 is road hazards. So things like potholes, debris, sharp objects, all of this stuff can put your tires in jeopardy. So you want to make sure that you're avoiding these things to the greatest extent possible, and that can be very difficult. I mean, I, for example, spend a lot of my time driving off-road, getting to whatever lovely destination I want to get to, and the ability to be able to do that is pretty awesome. Number 7, overheating. So when the heat rises in your tires, so do the risks. And one of the things that you want to be really concerned about is making sure that you're not letting that heat rise too far or too quickly. Again, check with the manufacturer for your tires and for your particular model of tires to see what's appropriate and what's not. Number 8 is tread depth. So obviously, that's the thing that most people think about most of the time. What's important about tread depth? Well, among other things, tread depth is what gives you traction. So the greater your tread depth, the greater the traction you're going to have available. And this can be especially important when you're running down the road to make sure that you don't have those kinds of issues. Alright, so I'm going to show you how to be able to read what's on the sidewall of your tire and understand what it means to you. Okay, so first of all, what you can see and read easily are the size of the tire, which is up at the top, the manufacturer, which is on the right-hand side, and the tire model, which is on the left-hand side. Let's get into what you can't see easily. Okay, so looking at the picture, you can see I've circled an area that's kind of underneath of the tire model, and that's talking about the load range. And different tires will have different load ranges assigned to them, but the other thing that's really important to understand is if you have dual wheels on your rig, so that's where you've got two stacked next to each other, not one in front of and one behind like you might find on a trailer. But if you've got dual wheels, you get a different load range than you do if you're just running a single wheel. So make sure you pay attention to that. There's a lot of really cool information on tires. Okay, right next to the load range on this tire we have PSI, which stands for pounds per square inch. That's how much you're going to inflate the tire to. And two things are important about what's on the sidewall. The first one is it's always going to address cold tire pressure, and the second one is that it's giving you a maximum inflation value for the tire, which is not necessarily the amount of pressure that you should be using based on your particular circumstances. So for example, mine says 80 psi max at cold, and based on my characteristics for how much weight I'm carrying, I actually inflate my rears to 75 psi and my fronts to 65 psi. And finally, we get to the date code. So the date code comes after the DOT label on the tire, and I'm not showing this to you because mine's actually a little bit odd. But basically the DOT number, the last 4 digits will be like 0220. That means that it was manufactured in the second week of 2020. If, for example, the tires that were on Isaac when I got it were 0214. So that was the second week of 2014. And as I said, 7-year-old tire, 7.5 years old at that point, way too old to be driving on. So check that out. You can also go Google for it. There's lots of good information about how to be able to read the date codes and so forth. So we've talked about all of the issues around tires and what can happen and how things can go wrong. Now let's talk about how to be able to mitigate some of this stuff. So the easiest way to be able to avoid, for the most part, most of these issues is by using a tire pressure monitoring system. So modern vehicles, many of them have TPMS, tire pressure monitoring systems, built into them. My last pickup truck did. It was super accurate. My previous truck before that, which was a 2016, it had sensors, but it wouldn't tell me the exact pressure. It would only tell me, if it went 20% below what the recommended pressure was, which to me was not good enough. My last truck was a Ram 1500, and that I could see the display of the exact pressure on the actual tires. My motorhome has no TPMS system that came with it native, and so just as I did with my travel trailer, I added an aftermarket system, and I'm using the same one that I've always used, which is a TST 507. There's a newer model out now, and if I was buying another one, I'd probably just buy the newer model. This has a display that lights up. You program it for all of your tires, so you can program your inner tire and your outer tire if you've got dualies, your front tires and your rear tires, and so forth. And then you set parameters for what is considered low pressure, what is considered high temperature, and when you hit those criteria as you're driving down the road, you'll get an alarm that goes off on the monitor, and that can give you enough of a pre-warning that you may not save the tire, but if you're paying attention and you get stopped quickly enough, you can probably save your rig, which is super, super important, obviously. I'm not comfortable running without a TPMS system, and honestly, I'm quite surprised at the number of people that really are okay with not having a TPMS system. To me, it's just such a safety feature, and one of the things I like about it really well is when I get ready on a travel day, I'll get up and I'll turn this on, and it takes it about 5 minutes to sync to all 6 of my tires, but as it does that, it'll display whatever temperature they currently are, and then I know whether or not I need to air up my tires before I go. And speaking of airing up my tires, I did a video about a shootout between a really expensive Viair air compressor and the Ryobi 1 tire inflator, which is much less expensive. I'll link that up here, I think. I don't know. Somewhere up here. So that you can check that out as well. because it's super simple. Using the Ryobi one, it's been super simple to be able to keep my tires aired up appropriately. One of the things that I've found with the tire pressure monitoring system has been a couple of different things. One is you have to, for the system that I have, you need to have metal tire valve extenders, or metal tire valves, even if you don't need extenders, to mount the caps on the end of the valve stems. And part of that is because you're adding weight, and if you're doing it on a rubber valve stem, you could get inaccuracies because it's not going to register properly, and it could cause problems. But early on with Isaac, early last year actually, I was up in Oregon, and I'd gone to do a tour at the Pendleton Underground tour, which was really awesome, and got back from the tour. I'd been gone about three and a half hours. When I went in, I had a tire that was at 80 psi, been running on it for a while, and so that was appropriate. When I came out, that tire was down to 55 psi, so I'd lost 25 psi in a matter of 3.5 hours. This was on, I think it was on a Sunday actually. So and couldn't find any tire shops that were open to do anything about it. Went to a Walmart. Walmart won't work on dually tires or motorhomes, by the way, at least the one that I went to in Oregon. They were, however, gracious enough to air up the tire for me, because at that point I didn't have any way to be able to do it myself. And I drove out to where I was planning to spend the night, which was at a casino. And the next morning, that tire, which had been aired back up to 80 psi the previous evening, was now down to 39. I was not a happy camper. I was actually a little concerned. So I called a local tire shop and asked them if they had, road service they could send out, and they said, yeah, but tell me what's going on. So I told him it was one of my dualies. And he said, look, here's the deal. If your other tire is aired up just fine, and we're only 5 miles away from you, you will be perfectly safe to drive in on that tire, and it'll save you, I think it was like $150 for a service call, which turned out to be a good thing all the way around. They ended up keeping it for pretty much all morning. I don't think I got out of there until like 1 o'clock in the afternoon, because it took them a really long time to find out what the problem was. The problem was, there's a beauty ring that goes on the outside of the wheels to make it beautiful, and apparently the valve stem had been rubbing against the edge of one of the holes of the beauty ring and had rubbed a notch into the valve stem, causing a very slow air leak that then became a relatively quick air leak. Now you'd think that would be the only time that would happen. Nope, it happened again. I think it was probably 7 or 8 months ago. So now I don't have beauty rings on either of my rear dualies. One is still up in Oregon. They forgot to give it back to me, and I'm okay with that. And the other one is in the garage at my Sticks and Bricks, which is now an Airbnb, and I'm okay with that too. So, all of this to say, being able to really see what's going on with your tire pressures and your temperatures can save a lot of heartache. Can you imagine what it would have been like if I would have had to have gotten out and checked individual tire pressures before taking off in the morning if I didn't have this guy to be able to handle that for me. So it just makes it so much easier. I feel so much safer because of it. So let me know in the comments down below what you thought about this. If you learned anything new, if you got anything out of it, let me know what that was. And thanks for hanging out. I'll see you next time. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I'd appreciate it if you subscribe, hit that thumbs up button, and always remember to sally forth, live your best life, go out and adventure in whatever way works for you.